Welcome guys. So today we are going to discuss Java constructors. We're going to look at what constructors are and how to go about them in Java. So to start with, a constructor, this is simply a function within the class that bears the same name as the name of the class and has no return type and is used to initialize newly constructed objects. So don't worry, for now I'm going to show everything with the help of an example. I'm going to show you a simple program to demonstrate how constructors work, how to create constructors, and what we mean by the word constructor. So without wasting much of the time, let's quickly look at a program and see what constructors really are. Discussion. So let's start. So assume, or let's see here we have a class code book. We've created a class code book, and inside our class we have three attributes. We have the title, the right of the book, and the year when the book was published. I'm sure as for now it's clear what attributes are. These are simply the properties of the class. If this is new to you, you need to watch the previous video about classes. And now inside this class we have this function. This function has the name as the name of the class. The name of our class is book, and the name of this function also is book. And this function has no return type. If you check, this kind of a function within a class is called a constructor, and the essence of this function called the constructor within the class is meant to initialize the object right off when the object is being created. So if you check properly here, we're initializing, we're giving the title, we've given it a default name called unknown title, and the writer, we have given it a default name called unknown author, and the year when it was published, we have given it a default 0. So each time we create an object called book, it will already have these as its default. Immediately we just create an object, it will already have its attributes. These values will be initialized to its attributes by default. So let's try to demonstrate how this works. So we are creating an object called book. Let's say we have book world war 2 is equal to new book. So we have, I'm sure this is clear to you. I already explained how to initialize and declare an object. So we have created an object of type book. The name is World War 2. So now I want to show you that just immediately after creating this book, its attributes already has some values by default. So before we change anything, I want to print out the attributes of this book World War 2, so that we see. I want to demonstrate that its attributes have been given default values that we defined in our constructor. So if we run this program, I want us to print out this. If you check in our class, we have another function, this function of type string, to string, its name is to string. This function returns the author name, and it prints out the title of the book, and it also prints out the year when the book was published. So this function will get the results from here, right? Because here we have given default values to the attributes and this function prints them out. So we have created a new object of type book called word02, and I want to call this function from that object. This function called toString is the one I want to call, and I want to print out the attributes to see if they have been given default values, if there are values assigned to it. So if we run the program, as you can see, we already have that title is a non-title, year published is 0, default and it has printed out this default constructor author is a non-author. If you check all these are the values that we defined in our constructor. If we change the value, let's say year published, by default let's put it maybe 2010, just as an example. If we run the program, everything changes there. The year published is now 2010. So this is the essence of a constructor. It gives values to the attributes when you just create the object. Immediately the object is created, it already has some default values. If you want, you can now go on to change. So I'm sure here it's clear what a constructor does and how to create a constructor. So the constructor has no return type, and the constructor is public. Mainly is public so that we can access it outside the class, and also the name of the constructor should be the same name as the class itself. So the class is book, the constructor name also should be book. So in a nutshell, a constructor is simply a function within the class that is used to initialize the attributes of the class. Yeah, so let's look at types of constructors in Java. So we have a default constructor, a constructor with parameters, and a copy constructor. So let's start with a default constructor. A default constructor, this is a constructor that has no parameters. So when you create this type of a constructor, you don't pass in parameters to the function. So if you remember very well the program that I've demonstrated, the function did not take in any values. So such kind of a constructor is called a default constructor. Another type of a constructor is called parameterized constructor. So let's look at this kind of constructor and differentiate it from a default constructor. Yeah, so parameterized constructor, this is the second type of constructor that we are looking at. So this is simply a constructor that takes in parameters. So without wasting time, let me just show and explain it with the help of an example. So let's write a simple program and demonstrate parameterized constructors in Java. So let's look at this example. So we have written our constructor and we have now given its parameters. So the constructor takes in a string called title, it takes in a number for the year, and it takes in a string for the author. So if you check inside our constructor, where to the title we are assigning now this title, that is the name that will pass to the function or that will pass to the constructor, and to the author we're giving the author this name that we are passing to the constructor, and the year we are giving it the year that we are passing to the constructor. So whenever we create a new object, we need to specify these. Let me show you. So if we come here now, when creating a new object, you've seen that here we have given it now the title, the year, and the name. So our constructor now, since our constructor takes in parameters, it takes in parameters, meaning when creating a new object also we need to give it parameters. And if we try to call this function that prints the attributes of this class, we will see that the names of the attributes or the values of the attributes will be the values that we gave to this object right when creating this function. So let's try to run and see. So seeing here the title is, you can see the name of the title name is the name that we gave to the constructor. If we change the name, everything will change. So I'm sure it's clear about parameterized constructors. These are simple constructors that takes in parameters when creating the object. For the default constructors, they don't take in any parameters, like I showed in the previous example. So I think it's clear for now. Yeah, another type of a constructor is the copy constructor. So suppose we want to copy attributes of one object and assign it to another object. How are we going to do it? So a copy constructor helps us do that. So with the copy constructor, we are able to compare two objects. We are able to assign attributes of one object to the other. So let me demonstrate how we can go about copy constructors in Java. Demonstrating a copy constructor. So inside the function, we have another constructor that takes in an object as its parameter. So it takes in an object of this very class. It takes in an object of the type book. So what does it do? It gives the values of the attributes for this object, it gives them to the new object. So for example, here we have created it such that it's taking in an object called other. This is of type book, and it's giving it the title for other has been given to the title for the new object, and the author for other has been given to the author for the new object, just like that. So let's try to create, let's create an object called World War One. This is also of the type book, and so we are able to assign the values from World War Two. We can assign them to World War One by passing World War Two to this when creating the new object, because we have a copy constructor that takes in an object as the parameter. So the copy constructor is taking in an object as the parameter, and it passes the values of the attributes for this object that is going in as the parameter to the attributes of the newly constructed object. So here Atomic Habits 2010 and James, these values are given to World War II, but when creating World War One, if we want to copy these values and give them to attributes of World War One, we can just pass in this object to the constructor, since the constructor takes in since we have a copy constructor that takes in an object as the parameter. So if we run this program, here I'm calling this function, I'm calling it from this object word1, but it will print out the values as the values that I give to word2. Why? Because here it means we're calling the copy constructor that copies the values from the other object to the newly constructed object. So let's try to run the program and see. As we can see, nothing is changing here. The values for word2 has been copied and has been given to word1, and I think it's understandable because that's how we have defined the copy constructor. Yeah, so if there are any questions, you can ask me in the comment section.